finding mentors and being mentors ourselves to people who really need this. And the business of mentoring is passing on the knowledge that you have and having the wisdom, presumably, that you have to people who don't have it. And the beautiful instinct that we have, as we get to senior level living, there's an instinct to pass on that information to the next or younger generation. Maybe this comes out of our caveman years or whatever, where older people trained younger people to develop hunting skills and to forage for food and do all the things that they have to do.
Welcome to the Rocktirement podcast. I'm Gidon Novik, your host. Join me as I dive into the vibrant, dynamic lives of some extraordinary people who will share their thoughts, feelings, and aspirations of their later years. Johann Redelinghuys, welcome to the podcast. It's the Rocktirement podcast, something I've been doing for a few months, finding incredible people to talk to that have had incredible lives and that are going through a transition in their lives, a transition in the later years into a new environment, into a new chapter. And I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. And met your son, Andre, not so long ago, and he told me what you were doing in the space with your newish business called Reset Retirement. And just welcome and thank you for making the time to chat to me and to share, I've got no doubt, some incredible thoughts and wisdom and experiences with whoever is listening out there. Thank you.
Gidon, delighted to be here, very pleased to have this opportunity to talk about Reset and the other things that we're involved with. But let me kick off perhaps with how Reset got going. I started an executive search business 50-something years ago, which evolved eventually into a major executive search company that was bought by an international American company.
And that was Heidrick & Struggles.
Heidrick & Struggles.
Yeah.
And in the last couple of years before I finally bailed out of it, I worked with boards of directors, primarily working on the effectiveness of the board and assessing board members and helping them to find new chairmen, new non-executive directors and so on. And in the course of this work, people often approached me and said, if you've got any non-executive director appointments, let me know because I'm interested.
Yes.
And when I investigated, I found out that they didn't particularly want to work on a board, but they didn't know what else to do. And I started finding out that retirement, as we have it and have had it for most of the last 50 or however many years, was intended to start when you're in your early 60s, and that was it. Companies had that as a rule that you would have to retire in your early 60s. But the actuaries say that if you're in reasonably good health at this stage of your life, you're probably going to live for another 20, maybe 30 years, maybe beyond that. And so the question is, what are you going to do to give your life meaning in those years?
Yeah.
When I ask people, sometimes they say innocuous things like, I'll play more golf or I'll fix the gutters on my house, but all that sort of pales into the next sort of year or two. And then people come back and they say, for goodness sake, release me from this and tell me what I can do to make my life meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's what we really get into. We talk to them and help them to formulate their life in the third age. That's why it's reset retirement, resetting what is generally understood to be retirement.
I mean, let's start with you.
Yes.
Because you're now 83.
Yes.
And you've had an incredible career, and I would like to talk about that. Just to talk about how you found these, talented, experienced people and find roles for them and coach them through their experiences in those roles. But from your perspective,
yes.
how have you found the evolution of your career or your...
Gidon,
Yeah.
I started my life in clinical psychology.
Yes.
And branched out of it quite early on into counseling and coaching. And soon after I made that decision, I started my own business doing recruitment and selection and psychometric assessment of people for career planning. Career guidance was my key skill, I thought. Built that business over a long period of time, and there are many people now who are themselves fathers and sometimes even grandfathers who I was involved with doing career coaching and making recommendations for them. So when I finally stepped away from what I was doing, I was 75 years old.
Was it hard to give it up?
It wasn't hard to give it up. So many people want to move out of Joburg and get to the sea, move to Plet or Hermanus or somewhere, and it doesn't always work. But I didn't realize how changing your identity also changes the way people react to you. A lot of it is attached, and I think it applies particularly to men, that your identity in your life is what do you do. You sit next to somebody at a plane, and if he says, Gideon, what do you do? You're likely to say what your career is rather than who you are.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I've dealt with have been senior people, and in their senior lives, they've had secretaries. And your life with a secretary is that you can come in and order this and order that and ask her to make this call and speak to so-and-so, and you have a particular relationship with. When you get home, your wife is the other woman in your life, just like your secretary was, and your instinct is to tell your wife what to do, and she's had her life now for 20 or 30 or however many years, and you're an intruder in her life. So we're being set up for a particular kind of conflict.
Sure.
That is kind of unexpected.
So there are all these twists and turns that you don't anticipate.
Yes.
That are waiting.
If they don't have a plan and if they don't have something meaningful to work toward, they die earlier than the 20 or 30 years that I mentioned earlier.
Sure. I was reading recently about the happiness curve of life, which is a U-curve.
Yes,
and you'll know a lot about it. But my understanding of it is, in your early carefree years, you've got nothing to worry about, no kids, no family responsibilities, and there's a lot of joy to be had. And then in the middle of one's life, there's family, jobs, responsibilities, pressure, blah, blah, blah. And then there's this last chapter or later chapter, which can bring great joy. So, and I say can bring great joy because it sounds like one has to be very mindful about creating the space to have that joy in that chapter of one's life, and to really enjoy it and make the most of it.
It's an important piece of information. This the happy start, and then into the bottom of the curve, you're less happy because you're being faced with the challenges of raising your children, building your career, making a living, doing all that sort of stuff, and working on a marriage, or something like that. And then it's assumed that you kind of have got through that at a stage in your 50s and beyond, where you are and where you're going, and you're going to be happier toward the end of your life than you were at the bottom of the U curve.
But it doesn't happen automatically.
It doesn't happen automatically.
Yes. Fascinating. And what have been your biggest struggles if you look back in terms of the transitions that you've had to make?
I had a side hustle for a long time while I was a partner and a director in my professional business. Yeah. And the side hustle was a beautiful 5-star boutique hotel in the Magaliesburg.
De Hoek.
De Hoek.
Yes.
That started as an idea of a place where we could go for weekends with my late put. And this evolved into a very beautiful 5-star country house hotel. And that was a wonderful, wonderful thing that always held me in Joburg. Because to get to Magaliesburg, obviously to live in Joburg makes sense. But although I had been approached quite often to sell De Hoek, I didn't want to do that. But finally, Isaac Shongwe, who's a very nice guy, and he and his wife were people who loved De Hoek over many years, made an offer that I couldn't refuse, and I sold it. And one of the most difficult things was letting go of that and coming to something which is much narrower, and that is a life without a meaningful side hustle. And in a way, that's what I'm busy still creating. But that was a difficult one. The other difficult one was, and we underestimate this, Gideon, in Joburg, I know a lot of people. And in Stellenbosch, I don't know a lot of people. So I kind of miss walking into the street and saying hello to people. I miss connecting casually with people. But, you know, it's strengthening. I'm getting to know people, and it's a great experience, very good experience.
I mean, just dwelling on that loneliness thing, because I see it with my mom, also contemplating moving out, maybe moving out of Johannesburg. And the biggest issue is the social. And, you know, I'll say, well, you know, you're outgoing, you can make friends. You've had lots of friends. You'll be able to make friends in a new place. But it almost feels she doesn't have always the confidence that she can build that network of friends.
Your old friendships are the most cherishable aspect of this whole thing.
Yes.
And the thought of new friends, you know, if you go on holiday or you're on a cruise or something like that, you can make contact with people and you can make good sociable contact, but you don't have the depth of knowledge that you have with your friends that you more or less grew up with.
Yeah.
It's amazing how extroverted, warm people still have difficulty making friends. It's a particular skill that you need.
And it's strange because you would think, well,
come on, get on with it.
There's a group of you that all want to make friends. So why
aren't we getting together and do? One of the things that I never thought of before, and that I'm into now, I never wanted to be part of some professional organization or some social or welfare organization. And I have in the last year and a half become a member of Rotary in Somerset West. And that is a very nice experience because Rotary's thing is not sociable, making contact. Rotary's goal is to service to the community. So we have a list of projects that we're involved with. And by the way, you meet the people that you do the work with, and it's very nice. So you do make friends, but the primary objective is to be of service. One of the things that we get involved in Rotary is mentoring, finding mentors and being mentors ourselves to people who really need this. And the business of mentoring is passing on the knowledge that you have and having the wisdom, presumably, that you have to people who don't have it. And the beautiful instinct that we have, as we get to senior level living, there's an instinct to pass on that information to the next or younger generation. Maybe this comes out of our caveman years or whatever, where older people trained younger people to develop hunting skills and to forage for food and do all the things that they have to do. So the business of becoming a mentor is a wonderful experience. And we don't do nearly enough of it in this country.
Such incredible value to be unlocked.
Yeah.
A while ago, actually strangely, just incredibly serendipitously got a mail from a guy who started a thing called the National Mentorship Movement, a guy called Dave Wilson. And he just happened to send me a note. But the idea was really what you're talking about is to have...
Is he South African?
Yes. Just to have a network, an organized network of mentors and mentees that want to gain from that knowledge and experience.
But the mentors are willing and often ask us about it, but there's no way of connecting with the people who need the information. So remember that where do those people live? They live in Khayelitsha or they live in Crossroads. How do we get to them? What is the connection?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the problem that needs to be solved. Just going back to the hook experience, it just made me think about material things, because that was a thing. It was a business and a place, and it feels like part of this process is also giving up the big house and some of the other assets and things to a lesser material. I don't know if that's a fair thing.
Let me tell you about the hook. When I was a student, or before I was a student, I worked in the hotel and the restaurant industry, and I was a waiter. And so the idea of running some form of hospitality was very appealing to me.
Yeah.
I completely underestimated the difficulty of it and the cost of it.
Yes.
If you're running a 5-star boutique hotel, the people who check in have their towels washed every day, their sheets washed every day, all that sort of cleanliness and top quality food, and you can't make excuses today that because the power was off, they're there for a particular reason. So running the hook was a lot more difficult than I expected. There were moments of great satisfaction when people gave you compliments and said how wonderful their stay had been, but there were nightmarish times. Like one of them was, I'll just mention this, we gave a dinner for the 50th or 60th birthday of a good friend of ours, Karl Taljaard. And there were 15 people booked to have the dinner. And we had a relatively inexperienced chef, which already is a signal. But I believe that he could prepare 15 services of a duck.
Sure.
On the menu that night was duck l'orange. And as we all sat down, we suddenly realized that we'd miscalculated. There were 16 people, not 15, and he didn't have
one extra duck.
So he had to make a quick apology and go and try and fix it. And you can't fix a duck in 15 minutes. Those are the sorts of things that we had to deal with. And because of Eskom and the power and all that sort of stuff, those are terrible challenges when you're doing hospitality.
Often you're giving up headaches as well when you let go.
Yes, absolutely. But it was a very good experience for me.
Yeah.
And a wonderful, the hook was built on a property that belonged to my father and my grandfather and my great grandfather. So on the Magalies River, there's a bridge, and it is the Johann Redelinghuys Bridge, which was named after my grandfather.
Amazing.
So it had a lot of emotional meaning for me.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about it is I often told people about this at the hook. The Magalies River flows south to north until it gets to the hook, and then for some reason it turns right and it flows from west to east.
Yeah.
So it makes a hook, which is the origin of the hook.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
And a lot of what was taught there or trained there was personal improvement, personal making a difference in your life. And when people come for a training program at the hook, we say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a direct turn in your life into something in a new direction, which is really
fantastic,
really powerful and lovely.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Tell me about family. I got a little bit of background on your beautiful...
We have a son and a daughter.
Yes.
My daughter, Madeleine, is not married. She lives in Cape Town and comes to us over the weekends. Andre lives with his beautiful 3 grandchildren and his wife Nicola in De Zalce, and so we're together. And the kids can hop on their bikes and come and visit Omar and be with us very often. So, we have a Friday night together.
You even have a Shabbat. And
we have a Shabbat, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not Jews, but we are into the whole Jewish routine.
Fantastic. And working with Andre, what's it like? Is it...
Andre is listening to this, so I'll manage it carefully. Andre has some very good Redelinghuys qualities. Mm-hmm. He's stubborn, opinionated, and sometimes inflexible. I'm sure he would say exactly the same thing about me, but it's a great privilege if you have a son who is at least interested in what you're doing and participating in the whole process. For me, it's all the benefits that retirees get out of some kind of connection with a younger crowd, the millennial, and that is I learn things from him and I learn things from Madeleine, my daughter, that I don't know and that I'm not aware of. Even though I think I'm a smart cat, it's hard. And often I sit with the remote in my hand and I think, how do I do this? And eventually I've got to phone him and ask him to come and help me. And many, many people my age or thereabouts have exactly the same problem. So one of the things that we do and will do more in Reset is introduce people to competence in technology.
So important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And can you give a good description of what AI is all about? I know vaguely, but...
I have to ask my son.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm also fascinated by companies, how they run, how they're governed, the structures. And it feels to me that oftentimes it's not, and even in the businesses that I've experienced and been involved with, that not enough thought goes into the structure of a business, how it's run, obviously, who's running the business, who the management teams are, but the governance of a business feels it feels like there's a gap. Is there anything from your experience in terms of lessons there that could help companies perform better?
Let me tell you, some of the stuff that I was particularly exposed to was boards of directors. And if you talk about what is governance, and normally most of the listed company boards have an executive, chief executive, and a non-executive chairman, and one, maybe 2 additional executives. It's usually the finance director and one other. But the other 6 or 8 or 10 are non-executive. And it's a great transition for people and something that many stumble over, that if you are the non-executive chairman, you can't make decisions in the same way that you did when you were the chief executive of a business. And many of the non-executive directors who are brought onto the board are prestige people that are collected to come and add clout to the board, but they can't resist making decisions. They can't resist managing.
Yes.
And that is a very bad thing. You want a board that supports the executive team, not undermines the executive team. That's a very important one.
Yeah, just a clear delineation between management and the board.
Yes.
And a board that's independent in that sense, that are, one step removed and can...
And the most difficult one is the chairman. From time to time, there's a situation where a board has a managing director of the company, chief executive, and he graduates into chairmanship. Now, I can give you the names of companies where that has happened. That's wrong. It shouldn't be, because then people who treated you like a CEO will continue to treat you like a CEO when you're the chairman. Yeah. And it defeats the whole purpose of having a non-executive director of any kind, particularly a chairman.
Is there a trade-off as a matter of interest with the non-execs in that they don't necessarily have a knowledge base in that industry or in that organization, and therefore, how much value can they add if they don't really know the business?
You're hitting all the key issues. Think of a government and take it out of South Africa. Look at a British government, for example. If you're a minister, you're appointed there not because you know the industry that you're the minister of, but because you give ministerial leadership. And that's not content leadership. Very often the people in the company get fed up with the non-executive directors who make decisions with a huge impact financially based on threadbare knowledge. So what happens when somebody is nominated to become a non-executive director of a company? The company secretary will take them on a tour of the business and show them what it's all about and make sure that they... But you don't learn in any depth what the industry is all about by just having a tour with the company secretary. On the other hand, if you are deeply embedded into the technology of that particular business, your judgment might be not objective. So you want somebody who can provide objective leadership based on some knowledge of what the company is all about, but not an overwhelming amount, because then people in the industry are going to know you, are going to respond in a particular way toward you, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about your chairman of your board, your wife.
Yes.
Sounds like an incredible woman, and loves to travel. And how did you guys meet?
Yeah, I think Andre prepped you.
He did.
I shared a house with some old student friends after I left university. And one day I was talking to one of the girls in the house and I saw a photograph. And I said, "Who's this?" And she said, "I don't know, it's a new girl who's just joined the airline." She was working in an airline. And I tracked her down and invented a reason to take her out. And within the first 3 days, I decided this is the woman I want for my wife. And within the first week, I asked her to marry me.
Wow.
And she said yes. And here we are 54 years later.
Talk about considered decisions.
Hey, how about that?
Amazing.
How about that?
So sometimes decisions need lots of time and analysis, and sometimes you just know it's the right decision.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly. Quite a number of people who are going to retire, you say to them, what you're going to do with your time? And they say, they've been thinking and they really would like to travel. And Emma and I just look at each other and say, haven't we been fortunate
Isn't
that
it a
we've
joy?
had these wonderful opportunities to travel?
Fascinating. And
I should also mention, we, in the early years of our marriage, we had a house in Umhlanga Rocks, and we thought that was very nice, but it just became too much trouble, and eventually we sold it, and we determined at that point not ever to have a holiday house again, because we have our holidays in all kinds of other nice places. And quite coincidentally, we met somebody in France on a trip who asked us if we have a house in France, and we said no, and he said, "You can have it." I thought it was beyond my reach. And we visited the small town of Boussac in the middle of France and met two guys who are well known in South Africa, Harry and Louis. And Harry was also an estate agent, and he told us about a house. It's a long story, this Gideon, so let me make sure I don't contaminate this whole thing. He showed us a house in Boussac that we could buy, and I liked it, but Emma didn't like it because it didn't have a garden. So the next time we were back there, he said, "I've got a house that's just come on the market, and it's just outside down the hill, because Boussac is X number of years old. It has a wonderful big chateau dominating it. And this house was the miller's home. It's a moulin based on a bridge by the river. And within minutes, it was like with the decision to marry him, within minutes, she and I looked at each other and we said, we're going to buy it.
Wow.
And we did. And that was 14 years ago. And we've had wonderful holidays there and a lot of meaning in our lives. But we're at a stage now where it takes too much maintenance. You know, who mows the lawn, who looks after there was a lovely little forest attached to it. You know, who's fixing the whole thing?
Yeah.
And we've decided that maybe we should...
Sure. Another big decision.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure. And what do you read or consume or listen to keep you? You're a very curious man. What do you...
I read everything that Douglas Murray writes.
Yes.
Do you know Douglas Murray?
I do.
Now, Douglas Murray, for me, is one of the most understanding, insightful people who knows what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
He's very, very clever. Eton, Oxford, you know, the whole background. He's very... and then Jordan Peterson is a psychologist, a Canadian psychologist, who writes a lot and has a podcast and all kinds of other things, and I read a lot of that, quite apart from novels. And, you know, these days I walk around with a set of earphones wherever I am, and if I have a gap of 15 or 20 minutes, I listen to part of the story that I'm currently into. And Emma and I, when we travel in the car, love to listen to stories and stuff like that, so we're not bored in the car.
It's nice, and it's nice that you can share a common interest.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. And you can imagine, if you know Douglas Murray, how much she likes Douglas Murray because of Israel.
He's got strong views and he's incredibly articulate.
Very.
Amazing. Well, it's been such a privilege to chat to you and just learn more about this fascinating space. And it just feels like there's so much that can and should be done for people in their later years and understanding what they need to do and what resources they can access just to...
senior living is a privilege.
Yeah.
It's a joy and a privilege. Senior living, embrace it.
Yeah. Thank you. Johann, great to chat to you.
Very, very happy. Thank you.
Such a privilege. Remember, retirement isn't about slowing down. It's about living the next chapter on your terms. I'm Gideon Novik, and this has been the Rocktirement Podcast, brought to you by Circle Senior Living.